We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Politics is ripe with the potential for surprise. Talk of a Hillary comeback is making the rounds. Speculation is rife that Biden won't make it to 2024. As the saying goes, anything can happen, and it usually does. But how prepared are the American people for the turmoil sure to follow in the wake of such Washington upheaval? Welcome back to Liberty Nation Radio on the Radio American Network. On this week's show, can Donald Trump pull the electoral rabbit out of the hat and reclaim the presidency in 2024? Will Joe Biden face an impeachment if the GOP gets its hands on the House? And a whole lot more. I'd like to take a brief moment to say a special thank you to our listeners in Knoxville, Tennessee on WETR 760 AM and 92.3 FM. Thanks for being part of the team. And remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Will he or won't he? Well, only Donald Trump himself and perhaps his hairdresser knows whether he'll be taking a run at the White House in 2024. But pick any pollster you want, and the odds certainly seem to favor the 45th president's comeback. Following this roller coaster ride has been Liberty Nation's editor-in-chief and analyzer of all things poll-related, Lisa K. Donna. Welcome back to the show, Lisa.
Good to be here, Mark.
So what's the skinny, Lisa? Is he going for it? And perhaps more importantly, how is the political world reacting to that?
Well, I just want to go on record as saying last year, I think during one of our C5 shows, I asked the entire panel, how many think President Trump will run again? And everyone said no, except me. So I just want to point out that maybe I was onto something. And indeed, you know, the January 6th thing was a classic case of the Democrats overplaying their hand. I mean, when Kamala Harris compared January 6th to 9/11 and Pearl Harbor Day, that I think that just about did in most conservatives.
Yeah, I think it's, clearly that's the line of attack because they don't have policy to run on. They don't have a strong legislative year behind them. And it's no coincidence that Joe Biden's goals for 2022 are exactly the same goals as he had for 2021 because he didn't complete any of them. So yeah, January 6th will be for the Democrats at least, that'll be what they attempt to rub down the prospects of Donald Trump.
Well, but going forward, you know, we have to remember it doesn't matter what the Democrats think of Donald Trump. It only matters what the Republicans think because they're the ones that nominate him. And it doesn't look like he's, you know, losing any ground with his base. In fact, you know, I wrote that the best advertisement for a Donald Trump comeback is Joe Biden. I mean, he's given him so many things to run on. You know, today we just have news that New York City has agreed to permit illegal aliens to vote. And, you know, and there's Afghanistan, there's inflation, there's a supply chain, and then there's the one he was going to fix, COVID. I mean, it's just all turning out so horribly for Biden.
Yeah, coming up to the 2020 election, it was a question of, we've got Donald Trump, who's a known quantity. And then, of course, you've got Joe Biden, who, despite having run for president for the better part of 30 years, is still unknown for how he will be in the White House. But now we've had almost a whole year of Joe Biden. And America's seen what he can and, more importantly, can't do. And I think you're right. You've got Afghanistan, inflation. I really don't think that people who were voting just to get rid of Donald Trump now have that same safety net of, well, at least Joe Biden's an unknown and he couldn't be any worse, could he?
Well, let me just give you a poll number that, you know, Rasmussen Reports does the daily presidential tracking poll. And so, you know, they always look at where the previous president was in the previous year. Well, today, for instance, and we are recording this on the 10th of January, we have Biden at 41% approval rating. The same time during his presidency, Donald Trump was at 44%. That really is very telling.
It is, and it's quite something because the pollsters now, they seem to be shying away from these questions about Joe Biden's performance. And Kamala Harris is even more so. I think it's an interesting aside, if I may, Lisa, that the Time Person of the Year that ran for 76 years decided this year not to do it. Now, bear in mind who won last year was Donald Trump, ending Obama's multi-year reign at the top. And it seems that Donald Trump was about to win again this year, so they've decided to cancel themselves, which is should tell you something.
Well, I wrote for Liberty Nation that if you think Donald Trump is going to go quietly into the night, you're sadly mistaken, or you're not on his mailing list, which is, flooding your inboxes in what I wrote was Noahic proportions. I mean, it's just an avalanche. And now they're starting to talk about his first rally of the year. And we're quite a ways from 2024, but his first rally of the year is, guess?
Arizona.
Correcto. And none of this is by happenstance. He's saying save America from Joe Biden. I mean, he's really mounting a comeback. There's just no two ways about it, Mark.
Absolutely. But there's certainly an advantage to Donald Trump not coming out and saying it, that, I'm here, I'm running for in 2024. There's an advantage to that, isn't there?
Well, I think actually the reason is that it has to do with campaign finance laws. So right now, a lot of the money that he raises goes to a PAC, or it goes to, in many cases, it goes to the Republican, the RNC, Republican National Committee. So I think it really has to do with financing and timing and the campaign laws.
Yeah, I think with a lot of that money that's coming in, because he really is a campaigning machine and a money-making machine in terms of electoral donations. But that money can then be used to support candidates pretty much of his choice, because he does still hold the big stick in terms of the RNC. So he could push America First or even MAGA candidates into a position ahead of their primary competitors, couldn't he?
Yeah, and let me ask you a question.
Please.
Who are the ones that really put Joe Biden over the top? The demographic. The demographic group.
It was suburban women.
Yeah, and so now I think Twitter did Trump a big favor. He's not on Twitter anymore. Those tweets are fading into the sunset rapidly. And so these suburban moms are now the very same women who are, beefing at school board meetings, I'll just put that nicely, and are on the FBI terrorist watch list. I mean, they might be rethinking their vote.
Well, yeah, in 2020, they were mildly miffed at some tweets. In 2021, they're potential domestic terrorists. So before 2024, we have 2022, of course, the congressional elections. What kind of influence do you think that Donald Trump will have on the 2022 results?
Well, clearly he's trying to, line up the people he likes, the America First candidates. In Pennsylvania, that's turning into a problem, I think, where Pat Toomey was. You've got two more establishment. I really don't know how Dr. Oz can be actually considered a Republican. He's trying to make sure he stacks the legislature with the people that he is fond of. And then, of course, there are some people who have turned around. There was Lindsey Graham who said, I've had enough, blah, blah, blah. Now he's down at Mar-a-Lago playing golf with Trump.
Yeah, I think Trump's used his year or so out of office quite wisely. He's been building alliances with those who were very much against him, especially after January 6th, whether that was because of firmly held beliefs or because they felt it was politically expedient to distance themselves from Donald Trump. So he's building bridges there. And of course, he's promoting certain candidates through his press release, his statements. And so he's building up, I think, what you could call a body of loyal followers, people who do believe in what he believes in politically. And if he were to return to the White House, he'd have a very strong legislative body behind him, as opposed to clearly Nancy Pelosi has the full Democrat team whipped and in place because they tend to vote en masse, along with Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, of course. But if he's hoping to have any legislative substance in the next session, he'll have to have a majority, and that majority can't be a divided one. It needs to be something that's fully behind him for him to achieve what he needs to achieve in the last term that he's allowed to run for.
Well, look, he's building a political war machine, and the Democrats, I think, are shaking in their boots. They'd rather face anybody other than Trump. And which is why I think so much is going on in the courts now. The New York state U.S. Attorney Letitia James, I think, has now issued a subpoena for Donald Trump Jr. and Ivanka Trump. I mean, they're really trying to pull out all the stops to do anything they can to prevent him from running. And, Mark, I don't know if 45 is going to become 47. I mean, history is not on his side, as if we look back at presidents that tried to run for a second term with a hiccup in the middle. But, you never know. I mean, who really knows? Trump is an unusual political animal, and, he's the despised nemesis of the left, but he's still got a strong base, and you can't take that away from him. And maybe the Democrats think they had cornered the market on the comeback kid, but I don't know. We'll have to see about that.
We'll be following the comeback kid very close at libertynation.com. Lisa K. Dunner, thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Mark.
Don't go anywhere. Later in the show, we're looking at the filibuster showdown on our special Talking Liberty segment. But up next, what's the beef in Kazakhstan? We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fight for freedom.
Daily tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.